Hello and welcome to this audio podcast. In this audio podcast series that around the ZtormTronix case review. This is an audio podcast aligned to works surrounding in around sort of in around works on sort of nephrology and how do young people with chronic kidney disease or CKD cope, um, uh, and what are the experiences between pediatric renal services and adult renal care. This is an audio podcast aligned to a Storm Robotics RFPB and a Storm Robotics production. In this audio podcast, there'll be a sort of an overview and comparing comparing coping sort of surveys or coping sort of questionnaires, and the way this is going to the way the this overview will highlight sort of context in highlighting a sort of comparison of several sort of coping surveys against several aspects aligned to aligned to sort of highlighting sort of a basis in around the different the sort of the questionnaires, and then there will be a sort of a subsequent audio podcast sort of highlighting the justification for why implementing the ways of coping survey would be in context of this, in context of drafted research works, why the ways of coping survey would be applicable in around this works, to understand sort of to understand sort of to understand how young people cope with chronic kidney disease or CKD, and sort of and in around the experiences between pediatric renal services and adult renal care. So the way comparisons would be made in context of the different coping questionnaires will be where there'll be an overview in context of the different sort of coping questionnaires. Then there'll be a sort of some particular aspects in and around the general validation aspects around the coping, around the different sort of surveys or questionnaires. Then there will be an overview in around, for example, the sort of context in which these different coping questionnaires or surveys have within them, sort of in context of the sub aspects in around the questionnaires. Then there'll be then there'll be a sort of a basis in around the factor structure, which is based on particular aspects on why on for example the for example why researchers have implemented the questionnaire. Then there will be bases in around the general test sort of reliability, the reliability of the questionnaire or survey, in around particular coping questionnaires. Then there will be a basis in around whether the questionnaire, whether different coping questionnaires or questionnaires have a self-report aspect to the questionnaire or survey. And then there will be a basis in around, for example, the time it might take for participants to complete the questionnaire or survey as well. So to begin with, for example, in this audio podcast series, there's been a basis in around the ways of coping as the main sort of questionnaire or survey. So and I like to sort of in around the sort of general validation. It has the ways of coping survey question. It has a general validation in around in so much that it is a validated coping questionnaire, and can be used to investigate sort of coping resources in various populations, and to provide a standardized basis in aligned to coping sort of research. The ways or was sort of the ways of coping the ways of coping questionnaire is abbreviated as the ways, and is a suitable questionnaire to implement in a young population as well. And in around sort of the sub aspects of the sub aspects of the questionnaire. For example, so the ways of coping survey questionnaire is identified from a positive and an emotion focused approach. There are eight sub entities in around the ways of coping questionnaire or survey, and these include: number one, confrontive coping; number two, distancing; number three, self-controlling; number four, seeking social support; number five, accepting responsibility; number six, escape; escape avoidance; escape and avoidance; number seven, playing for problem solving; and number eight, positive reappraisal. And the ways of the ways sort of the ways questionnaire can aid to understand what processes are apparent in a particular population. So in around the factor structure, the sort of factor structure, the ways measures the ways helps determine coping processes, not coping dispositions or styles. In a variety of studies, researchers have used the sort of ways of coping to investigate the components and determinants of coping, and the ways can aid to decide whether a coping process is good coping or not, and potentially it can also help identify specific coping process in a specific population. Again, in a specific population, in line to the general test and retest reliability aspect. The ways has been sort of evidenced as a sort of a validated and reliable, has been documented evidence as reliable and validated, as a validated questionnaire, as well as appropriate in a population where there is for example where for example there is limited information regarding coping processes and strategies. It is also reliable modality in a population where there is evidence of coping process and can aid in bolstering coping resources in around the self report aspect. The ways is a self report, meaning, for example, that if the survey of the questionnaire was distributed amongst a sort of population, a population of intrigue, for example, to collect data coping, in around coping, the 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 way the survey allows participants to self report their sort of basis in completing and self-reporting against the different entities as per mentioned, and in around the duration to complete the questionnaire, the ways of coping survey or questionnaire. It has been evident that it can take anything in a time between 10 to 15 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes to complete this questionnaire, survey, if implemented. Another survey or questionnaire has been documented, or has been sort of utilized, is coping health inventory for parents, coping health inventory for parents, and in around the general validation aspect of this particular survey. It is a valid coping survey, and the coping health inventory for parents includes questions relating to coping processes as well. In around sort of the sort of sub entities of the coping health inventory for parent survey or questionnaire. This particular questionnaire doesn't unfortunately does not have sort of the same sort of sub entities as the ways survey or questionnaire. The sub entities of the coping health inventory for parents sort of questionnaire or survey primarily are in regard to, primarily in regard to, or help researchers or investigators to identify maintaining, for example, sort of maintaining family integration, cooperation, and an optimistic definition of a particular situation, and maintaining support or self-esteem and psychological stability, and also understanding the medical situation through communication with parents, and consultation with medical or clinical staff. And so, in line to the sort of factor structure, the coping health inventory for parent survey or questionnaire does have again has sort of those sub entities, as per mention, and where coping, and wherein coping in children and young people can be assessed, but are not factor structure, sorry, for example, but at the same time are not the factor structure. The factor structure is not detailed enough, like those in the ways of coping survey or questionnaire. And aligned to the general test and retest reliability, the coping health inventory for parents survey is it is it is a it is a reliable a reliable survey or questionnaire that can only really be utilized when observing health situations primarily surrounding parents or relatives, with minor elements that relate to children or young people, and even to assess and to even assess even to even assess sort of coping processes and strategies. In line to the self report aspect, the coping health inventory for parents survey or questionnaire is like the ways of coping survey, or the ways is a self report questionnaire survey as well, in line to the sort of duration, in line to the duration for the coping health inventory for parents questionnaire survey to be completed. For example, it can take up to 10 minutes 10 minutes to complete as well. So onto the next survey, the next sort of survey or questionnaire, and that is the satisfaction with life scale, or satisfaction with life scale, which is a questionnaire that aligned to the general validation. It is not a valid. It's not unfortunately. It's not a valid coping questionnaire or survey, abbreviated as the SWLS. Satisfaction with life scale is used primarily to assess a particular domain of life. So, for example, work or family, and explicitly the SWLS is a global questionnaire or survey, and primarily focuses on life satisfaction, and aligned to sort of the sub entities around the SWS. It does not include, unfortunately does not include questions that relate to coping strategies, and thus cannot be used to evaluate or assess coping processes. In line to the factor structure, in line to the factor structure around the satisfaction with life scale or SWLS, and the life satisfaction is one factor in the more general construct of this of the subject well-being. The SWS survey or questionnaire is more cognitively driven than emotionally, as well. And in line to the general test and a retest reliability, the SWS is a reliable survey to assess a particular domain of life. However, it cannot be used to assess coping cannot be used to assess coping processes, or coping strategies. Aligned to the self-report aspect, the SWS has a self-report has a basis in around self-report. The duration to complete this particular survey or questionnaire in around the SWS it's been documented as about 5 minutes to complete the questionnaire. In line to another questionnaire or survey. Another questionnaire survey is the kids coping scale, kids coping scale or KCS, and aligned to the general validation around the KCS. It is a valid coping survey or questionnaire and can be completed in children as young as 8 years of age, and aligned to the sub entities around this around the kids coping scale or KCS. The KCS questionnaire or survey is not unfortunately is not detailed enough. The KCS uses sort of retrospective self-reports of coping in response to stressful situations. The sub-entities around the survey or the questionnaire, the KCS questionnaire or survey are aimed at children or young people aged between 8 and 12 years. And this would make the KCS a problem to implement if researchers want to investigate sort of coping processes in adolescents or sort of older adolescents, and in line to sort of the factor structure. The KCS requires children or young people to think about a problem or something which has gone wrong. So, for example, what did they do, and what did they do, and to respond to sort of nine particular aspects of this questionnaire or survey. And it primarily the KCS primarily explores sort of coping styles, and for example, and not and unlike the ways for example, the KCS does not look at for example, the sort of does not look at sort of coping, for example, unlike in the detail as the ways survey or questionnaire, and in line to the self report the self report the self report aspect of the KCS. Yes, the kids coping scale does have and allows young people to complete the questionnaire, the survey, and in around the duration to complete. It takes has been documented and evidence in the literature where the KCS has been implemented. It takes about 5 minutes to complete for participants to complete the KCS. And finally, in around the questionnaire survey referred to as the Coping Resources Inventory, or CRI. So the CRI, in line to the sort of general validation aspect of the CRI, CRI survey or questionnaire. It is a valid coping. It is a valid coping sort of survey or questionnaire. This survey. It is a valid coping survey. The CRI is a tool used to identify resources available to individuals for managing stress and coping. The CRI can be used to investigate coping can be used to investigate coping resources in various populations and to provide a standardized basis in coping research. In line to excuse me, in line to the sort of sub entities in around the survey, the CRI survey or questionnaire. Unfortunately, the CRI, whilst it is a sort of a survey or questionnaire that allows coping to be investigated, the sub entities in around the CRI the CRI questionnaire or survey are biased to assessing stress and the resources an individual may use. There are five sort of sub entities, for example, which includes, for example, number one, cognitive; number two, social; number three, emotional; number four, spiritual or number four, spiritual or philosophical; and number five, physical. And so aligned to the sort of factor structure and the CRI, the coping resources inventory survey or questionnaire is detailed has detailed factor structure, but the CRI does not approach emotion focused coping and problem focused coping under the different sub entities. So for example, where it's been mentioned in aligned to the sort of five different sort of sub entities in around this in around how this in around how the CRI is implement in and around how the CRI assesses or looks at sort of coping, the again sort of cognitive, social, emotional or spiritual, philosophical or physical. The CRI again does not approach these aspects of the survey or questionnaire in a way where researchers or investigators are looking to understand sort of coping sort of strategies used in young people to understand in context of for example in around illness in around illness or aspect or in around health and disease. And in around the in around the self report the self report aspect of the coping resources inventory or the CRI. It is a survey or questionnaire that does allow a self report aspect to there is a self report aspect to the questionnaire that people can sort of complete the questionnaire survey in sort of their own times, for example, and on their own, for example. So there is the CRI does allow a self-report aspect, and in line to the duration, the duration to complete this particular survey or questionnaire in around the coping resources inventory, or CRI. It takes about it's been documented in evidence where it has been used or implemented. It takes in around about 10 minutes to complete this particular questionnaire or survey. So that draws this audio podcast to a close. This has been an audio podcast sort of simply highlighting sort of a comparison, or comparing sort of the different coping surveys that have been utilized in different forms of different sort of different sort of coping research in different populations. And in this audio podcast, it was just a sort of an overview aligned to sort of in part highlighting sort of a basis for why the ways of coping, or the ways would be sort of an appropriate survey or questionnaire to be implemented, to understand how young people young people to help answer the question, how do young people with chronic kidney disease cope, and what are the sort of experiences between pediatric renal services and adult renal care. Once again, this has been an audio podcast aligned to the ZtormTronix case review v.3. This is an audio podcast aligned to a Storm Robotics RFPB, and this has been an audio podcast aligned to another Storm Robotics production. The next audio podcast will look at will highlight some context or additional context in around the sort of justification for implementing the ways in and around this sort of in and around this sort of research, or this works. Thank you for tuning in.